Hello, everyone. I'm Reese.
And I'm Kelsey.
And this is episode 2 of Corrections.
My favorite thing.
Your favorite thing is corrections?
Admitting that I was wrong.
Yes, I know.
I live for this moment.
Yeah, you're good at it.
So we're going to start with me. We think it probably makes the most sense to go chronologically from episode to episode, starting with the content that I was talking about, then going to the content that Reese covered in that same episode, just to help you follow along.
Probably.
If not, give us a better suggestion. We might take it. We probably won't. I like how this way works.
Yeah, okay. Then we're not changing it, I guess.
I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah, me too.
So this correction is from episode 3. So the next couple ones are all going to be from episode 3. The first one is that I mentioned that humans are logging bamboo forests. And I wanted to bring this back to incorrections because it was really interesting to me. And as I listened to us say it again, I wondered to myself why bamboo logging was happening. Because I think in the episode I said that we were using it for timber. And as I heard myself say that, I thought, that might not be right. However, turns out it is logged, and they use it to make things like furniture and some disposable products. So,
that makes sense.
Like plates and chopsticks. Yeah.
We're guilty of owning some of those.
We are, except for we didn't use them disposably.
Okay.
But in general, they're meant to be disposable. I thought that was super interesting, so I kept looking into it, and I found out that there was a huge logging increase of bamboo in 1998. And that was because in China, they banned the logging of deciduous trees. So the industry fell, and they needed something to replace it with. So they chose bamboo. Bamboo grows super quickly, like a foot in a day or something wild like that. So it's a really good source for these things, but it only seeds out every 10 to 100 years, just depending on the species. So if you cut down a bamboo forest, it doesn't grow back a lot of times.
Wow.
Depending on the species. Now, I also found out that there are 1,200 species of bamboo, and 600 of them are at threat of extinction.
Whoa.
Isn't that crazy?
You said 1,200 total?
Yeah.
And half of them?
Half of them.
Wow.
Not great for bamboo.
No. Extinction is not great.
No, not for anybody.
No.
So I looked more into this and tried to see if there are new logging bans to help protect bamboo species, and I couldn't find anything. I found a really interesting article about how when pandas, we're back to pandas, when pandas were removed from the endangered species list or were downgraded from a species of extreme concern, that was linked to an increase in bamboo logging, which makes sense because the government was protecting bamboo forests because that's where the pandas were living.
Right.
So now that the pandas are doing better, the bamboo is doing worse again. That's not cool.
No.
In my mind. I think bamboo is really, in general, just a cool plant.
Well, wait a second. Is the logging ban still in place, though?
Yeah, but only for deciduous trees.
Okay.
Which I think, and I'm going to have to revisit this and do a correction on this, I think bamboo is a grass. I don't think it's a tree.
No, I think you're right.
I think it's in the graminoid family.
Although maybe you told me that, so I don't know.
I'm creating a whole world in your brain.
You are.
So that you don't know what's real and what's not real.
Yeah, you're my source for scientific facts.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
I was so interested in this that I am going to cut myself off here because I think it would be really cool to go further into this topic, at least in a first segment, but maybe for a full episode.
Yeah.
We could talk about the intricacies of bamboo.
Definitely.
And then, of course, we get to talk more about pandas.
Yeah. Gotta keep that gravy train rolling.
That's why everybody comes back to the podcast. Because you all love learning about pandas.
Yeah, that's why I'm here.
Speaking of pandas, my next correction, I'm never going to escape them. My next correction isn't a correction. I mused in this first episode, in episode 3, about whether or not connecting habitats will help pandas become more genetically diverse. Because if you remember, they're living on 6 mountaintops, and the Chinese government bought up a bunch of land and displaced 170,000 people so that they could rebuild bamboo forests that connect these 6 mountaintops.
Yeah.
Which is a really cool step. Regardless of how you feel about pandas, having that much bamboo forest is going to be really important for all species.
Sure.
So I was trying to figure out if connecting those peaks was actually going to make a difference, and what I found was nobody knows. They're hoping it will.
Well, isn't a big part of it that the pandas have to come down off the mountain?
Yeah. Yep. I'm a little worried that they're not going to do that.
You know what they should do?
What?
They should just build bridges.
Yeah. That's an idea.
We should pitch that. I think this is a winner, Kels. Just long, like misty, ancient Chinese suspension bridges.
Have you watched Kung Fu Panda recently?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
This feels like an idea directly from Kung Fu Panda.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Anyways, in theory, creating more habitat for these pandas to use will cause them to spread out more. And the hope is that in this spreading, they're coming into contact with other groups of pandas and they're diversifying their genes.
Sure.
But regardless, like I said, having those really lush bamboo forests is going to be important for a whole host of species.
What other species thrive in bamboo forests?
I don't have an answer for you, but I can say those 600 endangered species of bamboo, there's probably going to be a place for at least some of those in this bamboo forest.
Okay.
So maybe we can revisit that as well. What else lives in bamboo forests?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Moving on from the bamboo and panda discussion is...
For now.
Is a discussion more about the IUCN. So if you remember our main topic for episode 3, we talked about the IUCN Red List of threatened species. And I found a list actually on iucnredlist.org, which is super cool. Pause the podcast right now and go look at this website.
I'm doing it.
And we're back. Just kidding. But if you're listening, absolutely check out iucnredlist.org, because you can look at every species that has been evaluated. You can see what the threats are to it. You can see where it's located. Basically a huge breakdown of all the information you could want on a bunch of these species that are sensitive. I spent a good amount of time on it while I was looking up the IUCN after the third podcast.
I'm sure that's a great resource for this topic. Probably the best.
Yeah, and I didn't find it until after I'd done the episode on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had gone to the IUCN website and couldn't find their red list information. And then when I went back to learn more about it after I'd done the podcast, which is the perfect time to learn more about a subject after you've just done what's supposed to be a 30-minute breakdown of it, whatever.
That's why we do these.
Exactly. But I did find a full listing of groupings, of animal groupings and plant groupings, and what percentage of them are endangered or threatened. So I found that 40% of amphibians, 25% of mammals, 33% of reef corals, 31% of sharks and rays, 27% of crustaceans, 14% of birds, which is interesting. Only 14% of birds are considered threatened. So go birds.
Yeah.
Doing a great job.
They're fine.
And then, as I mentioned in the first podcast, or in the first round of this, 34% of conifers. So that leads me into when I was talking about conifers, I couldn't quite give information on why they weren't doing well. And I had a general idea.
War on Christmas.
That's, I think, the same joke you made.
We'll cut it out.
That's staying in. So what I found out was that what's plaguing conifers is a really multifaceted issue. And I learned this from the iucnredlist.org website that I was just talking about. So what I found out is that conifers are facing sort of a lot of problems. And I just made a short list of some of the ones that I saw that were really recurring. So deforestation is obviously a huge deal. Makes sense that deforestation is what's hurting trees. But the reasons behind the deforestation are sort of what leads this to be a challenging issue. Because trees are being cut down to be used for urban development. So clearing the trees so that you can expand cities so that people have places to live. Mm-hmm. Also for agriculture, because as the world gets more developed, it eats more meat, drinks more milk, needs more sources of animal protein. So we have to continually deforest so that we can graze our cattle and things through there.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
It's also being deforested in use for timbers and stuff like that, and then pulp and papers and all those things, which, again, we need, but the conifers are not agreeing, I don't think, with that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully our demand for that sort of thing goes down a little bit more as we move forward in the digital age. We won't need as much paper.
That's the hope. I'm not sure that paper, though, is the biggest. I think it's mostly development. It's building supplies. So we should just stop building new buildings.
Yeah. Or build them taller.
Yeah.
Just go up instead of out.
Yeah. I don't know how that would use less. Oh, you mean for removing it for urban development?
Yeah.
I was thinking in terms of using the trees. But yeah, we could go up and we could use steel.
Yeah. There you go.
I've solved the problem.
Problem solved.
Some of the other things, though, that are negatively affecting conifers is the change in natural systems, which is a very blanket term for a lot of really fine scale details. So, for example, a lot of conifers rely on fire to be really successful. Jack pines need fire to come through, or their cones will not open up and release their seeds.
Yeah, I think I saw something about that on Planet Earth.
Yeah, it's super cool. Jack pines are my favorite tree for that reason, because they're just so sassy. Need a little bit of fire. If you get their cones really, really hot, they like explode open. It's a great thing.
Cool.
But jack pines aren't the only tree that really needs heat to survive. As places get more urban and human life spreads across the landscape, humans tend to suppress fire because it causes a lot of damage and frequently takes human life.
Yeah.
Which isn't good.
No, it's not.
Not what you want.
No, that's not what you want as a human. But as a jack pine,
you need some fire.
You need some fire.
Now, also with natural systems is water management, which I thought was a really interesting thing.
What do you mean?
But as humans are damming water and doing or building water treatment plants and things like that, that is negatively affecting the success of the conifers by changing the water flow and the water systems. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you build a dam, that fundamentally changes that source of water.
Yeah.
But I saw that on more than a couple declining conifer species as a cause for concern.
Dams and rivers?
Dams and rivers, yeah.
I guess it makes sense.
Changes in water management.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre. But I just, again, thought that was really interesting. And as I was listening to myself talk about it, I thought maybe I should have a better answer for that.
Yeah. That's extremely interesting. I'm a little surprised, honestly.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now, the last thing I want to talk about from episode 3 was I really just want to clarify the difference between data deficient and not evaluated on the IUCN Redlist list of designations.
Okay.
So I sort of muddied it, and looking back on it, I wasn't totally understanding what the distinction was. The distinction is if a species is listed as not evaluated, there is no research that has been done on it.
Okay.
It has not been evaluated.
They haven't even tried.
The IUCN definition for data deficient is that there is inadequate information to make a direct or indirect assessment of its risk of extinction based on its distribution and or population status. It also says that something in this category might be well studied and even it's well known, but that the appropriate data on its abundance or distribution are lacking.
Interesting. So they've tried, and there's some information, or there's a lot of information, but it's just not relevant.
Yeah, it's the wrong information, which is really interesting.
That is.
But yeah, I thought that was really important to touch on that again.
Thank you for clarifying. I don't think I understood that the first time around.
Yeah, I don't think I did either.
I was too proud to ask.
You should never feel like a question is something not to be proud of.
This podcast is a humbling experience for me. So.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah.
I'm helping you grow.
Yeah. So if you'll remember, in episode 3, I was talking about the Harmonic Series.
Yeah.
Are you just pretending to remember?
No, it was the one with like 155 hertz.
Yeah.
If you put your finger in the middle of a string.
Yeah.
The frequency on either side
theoretically
should play the same note.
Yeah.
I was listening.
You were. Those are some highlights. Yeah. Nice job.
Thanks.
It was a test. You passed. So the Harmonic Series. One of the questions that you asked me when we were recording the episode was, what are the applications of the Harmonic Series outside of music?
Yeah, because it has a whole equation, like a mathematical equation.
It does, yeah. And I thought that was a really good question because honestly, I have no idea.
That's why we do this.
Yeah, exactly. So researching it a little bit, I found out that in mathematics, there are a couple of applications for it. One is the fact that the Harmonic Series, and I briefly touched on this, but it wasn't really applicable to what we were talking about. The Harmonic Series is a divergent series, which means at some point, if you go far enough along, the frequencies aren't going to be exact. They're going to change slightly. Because of that, this is applicable to some mathematical problems, and it creates paradoxes. There are some situations that it's used and applied to. I'm not going to go into them all now because they're complicated and they'd take long enough to explain, but I'd like to link the different problems. There's a couple Wikipedia articles and that sort of thing that explains them a little bit better. They're extremely interesting, and the Harmonic Series is sort of the key to the puzzle.
Does this have anything to do with proofs?
Kind of. It's sort of like that, except they're not really geometric things. They're more complex problems, I guess. So a few of them would be like the Jeep problem. Also the ant on a rubber band, which have you heard of that?
No, but can I guess what it means?
Yeah.
If you're listening and you know what this is, be prepared for me to sound super, super dumb.
They're all going to Google it and be like, what an idiot.
I think it has something to do with if there's an ant walking along a rubber band and then you stretch the rubber band, it gets too small for the ant to walk on at some point?
Sort of. So it's the question is if the ant progresses a certain distance in like 1 second, and in that same time frame, the rubber band stretches a certain amount, will the ant ever reach the end of the rubber band?
Oh, wow. I was way off.
Well, it's more complex than you would think. But the whole idea is you wouldn't think so.
Right.
If you come at it from a philosophical perspective, the answer would be no. But the Harmonic Series and the divergent nature of the Harmonic Series actually proves through an equation that the answer is yes. I'm not entirely sure how. That's why you should just follow the links because it explains it way better.
It's interesting to me that you can answer a philosophical problem with a math solution.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of a philosophical and a math question, and the answer is different depending on your perspective.
That's fair.
The one that's like ant on a rubber band that's a classic example is Achilles and the tortoise, which I didn't read a lot on. I saw it sort of at the end of doing research right before we recorded, but it's one I'd like to look into more because it's from, obviously, the original Greek thinking on these things. And then the last one is the block stacking problem, where you have dominoes and you line them up to a certain degree, and after a certain point you can hang them over the edge of the table. Like you stack them at the edge of a table, and you slightly shift each one, and it sort of forms an arch.
I remember doing that with my dad.
You do?
When I was a kid, yeah.
Yeah.
And still to this day, sometimes it'll pop into my head and I have a moment of how in the heck did that work?
Yeah, I still don't know because I looked at a diagram on it, and it doesn't seem to make any physical sense. Apparently, the reason it works, the harmonic series.
Wow.
Right?
There's so much in this world that I have no knowledge of. I love it.
Me too. The other thing in mathematics is probability. There's a lot of application for the harmonic series in probability. Just to touch on a few, rainfall, like record rainfall years, they use it, traffic jams, and for the gamblers, shuffling cards. So a lot of interesting applications to this. I don't understand any of the math well enough to actually go into it, so just look into it yourself because it's super interesting.
I appreciate that you know your limits.
I do.
I don't. Clearly, my corrections are always 5 times as long as yours.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because mine aren't really corrections. They're just, I don't know.
That's fair.
Yeah. They're just me admitting I made mistakes.
That's the first step.
Giving away our secrets, our trade secrets. The second question that you asked me was volume. If a note is lower, is it going to be louder?
I remember that question. It's been bugging me.
Yeah, because the basic idea was lower notes are the fundamental frequencies, and they have overtones built in above that. So logically, if you follow that train of thinking, yes, the lower notes would be louder because they have more notes above them. It doesn't exactly work that way. It's not that simple.
It never is.
Right. The answer is that it depends on a few factors. First is, what is the source producing a sound? So if you think of like a piano versus a trumpet versus a flute versus someone singing, it's going to be different because they have different ability to produce more power behind them. And that is measured, that's the intensity, and it's measured in decibels. That's why you don't ever really hear, and I don't know, this might be a thing that like too many hertz is bad for your ear, but you definitely hear too many decibels is bad for your ears.
Oh, yeah.
As human. And that kind of brings me to the final one, which is the physiology of the ear perceiving the sound. So for humans and dogs and cats and whatever, it's all going to be different because the ears are different.
Interesting.
The bottom line is the fundamental is always going to be louder and richer than the harmonics. So like if I play a low C on the piano versus playing a C 2 octaves above that, it's not necessarily that the low C is going to be louder than the high C. It's that the fundamental tone of the low C is going to be louder than its overtones. And the fundamental tone of the high C is going to be louder than its overtones.
Okay.
So that's the big takeaway. All right, next up on the correction, trumpets don't have buttons, they have valves. I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah. I'm sorry, trumpet players. I call them buttons. Rookie move. Moving on.
Wait, are they buttons on saxophones or are they valves on saxophones?
No, they're keys.
Oh, my goodness.
I know. Just come up with a universal term for these things.
I'm going to call them clackers. Every single one of them.
All right. I might vote a different way. No offense. Finally, I wanted to touch on throat singing. There wasn't really a correction per se here. I just wanted to explain a little bit more what I was talking about when we went into the implications of overtones in throat singing. Because in throat singing, the idea is that one person harmonizes with themselves. That's the whole reason. So it sounds weird, and by hitting these strange guttural syllables, they can not only play the fundamental or sing the fundamental note, they can also pick a harmony above that. And some, I think in Mongolian throat singing, they can do 2 or 3 overtones above it, which is just out of this world. There's an R&B singer, Lala Hathaway, if you haven't heard of her. She's insane in general, but there's an instance, and I'll include a link, of her harmonizing with herself. It's unreal.
So moving on to episode 4, you had asked me how reefs would help an island.
That's right.
And I had said that I thought islands could help reefs, but I wasn't sure how reefs could help islands.
Okay.
So I looked it up. And what I found out is that coral reefs are really important for island health, but not in ways that you might think. I found out that they work as storm breaks. So if you get a really intense storm where the wave action is really high and really intense, it helps to stop and slow down those waves before it hits the island, the shoreline.
Like a levee, sort of?
Yeah. So it helps to stop sand from washing back out into the ocean. It helps to slow down erosion and just keep the island really productive.
Interesting.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
Yeah. So reefs are important?
Reefs are absolutely important. But I hope that you had that as a takeaway before this moment.
Yeah. Yes, I did.
In that same sort of vein, Reese and I went back and forth on how to pronounce Maldives. In this part of the world, it is pronounced Maldives, not Maldives.
Okay.
Is it possible that elsewhere it is called Maldives? Yes. But Google told me that it's Maldives.
The repository of all wisdom and knowledge.
You know it.
How is it? What I'm curious about is how do they pronounce it in the Maldives?
That was my question, and I could not get a good answer on it.
Is it like a different word than Maldives or something?
I kind of wonder.
Interesting. Well, there's always more corrections episodes to be done later.
That's true. We'll revisit this one. I thought this was going to be a quick correction, and then you had all these questions for me.
Sorry.
No, they're great.
Yeah. I'm glad you had a pronunciation one, though, too, because I have one in mind.
Nice. Honestly, I hope we get to a point where we only have to do pronunciation or word corrections, not actual content corrections.
Yeah. Probably not, but pronunciation is definitely never going to go away.
That's a good point, and I'm actually going to take this moment.
Sure.
I've been saying tabitulated on this podcast when I have meant tabulated, and it took a game with Reese and his parents for me to realize that I had been combining two words into this one magical word.
Yeah.
It worked great.
I didn't want to correct you because I didn't know if to habituate was a word that I didn't know what it meant.
That's fair.
And I didn't want to look stupid.
Well, thanks for just letting me fall on that sword.
Sorry.
But regardless, sometimes I say stupid stuff, and that's fine. I'm going to move on now to One Health. As if you can remember, One Health is what we covered in episode 4. Mm-hmm. And I said some things in it that weren't necessarily big glaring problems, but I sort of played fast and loose with the One Health episode.
Sure.
So to start out, Hippocrates was born in 460 BC and died in 350 BC.
Okay.
So when we originally talked about this, I gave a 1,000-year range.
Yeah. Which, in the grand scheme of things, is pretty narrow. I understand from a science perspective that 1,000 years isn't necessarily the largest time frame.
If we're looking at the history of the Earth,
Yeah.
1,000 years is nothing.
Yeah, on the cosmic calendar, 1,000 years is not very long. Compared to a lifetime of one person, though.
It's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Well, thank you. BC.
BC.
Okay.
460 to 350 BC. Now, I also went on to talk about germ theory. And I can't remember if I mentioned it, but I would love to do an entire podcast on germ theory because there was a time where people believed that you spontaneously got illnesses. They just popped up inside of you.
Well, yeah. Because of your, moral transgressions.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
We know that's the best way to diagnose. What have you done lately that makes you deserve this disease?
Sure.
However, the germ theory was popularized by Louis Pasteur or something like that. He was a French guy.
He was a French guy, but he was much more than that.
Yes, absolutely.
He was the milk guy, right?
Yes, that's where pasteurization comes from, which I actually have here in my notes.
Yeah.
So germ theory was popularized by him in the 1860s.
Okay.
But he actually contributed a lot to our current day life. So like I said, like you brought up, he popularized the pasteurization method, which, if you don't know what it is, for a very general overview, it stops the bacterial growth in things like wine and milk. It's just a process that you can put these things through to make them more safe and more shelf stable.
In wine, too?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I guess.
That's important to me.
I know. You're literally drinking a glass of wine right now. But he's also been referred to as the father of microbiology. He, as I mentioned, proved that illnesses and diseases were due to microbes, so things that got into the human body and made you sick, which for us now seems like a pretty basic understanding of medicine, but in the 1860s was not the case. Now, he used this knowledge to create the first vaccines. So
Really?
it ties really well into that conversation we had about vaccinating your kids and germ theory and all of the things that go into the health of an organism and an environment and the animals that live in that environment. But yeah, he built the rabies and the anthrax vaccine. Obviously, the rabies one stuck around.
Yeah.
Anthrax, not so much.
Which, we really could have used.
In every 1980s movie where somebody opens a package that they aren't supposed to
Yeah.
in an office. But he made super important contributions to the medical community. So I just wanted to give him just a little spotlight. And maybe we'll do a much bigger spotlight in the future.
Yeah.
And maybe we can do a little bit of digging and see if there were any really badass women who helped him.
Sure.
Because that's always my favorite part of history.
Yeah. Mrs. Pasteur.
Possibly.
Yeah. That'd be cool.
Yeah. Now, my last correction is about Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease.
Jacob Kreutzmann.
Jacob Kreutzmann's disease. Again, sorry to any Jacob Kreutzmanns out there. Now, I sort of muddied the water with what Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease is, which from here on out, I'm just going to call it CJD or CJ disease because it gets really wordy saying the whole thing over and over again.
It's very consonant heavy, too.
Yeah, it is. Now, CJ disease is not what you get from eating contaminated beef. They don't think. So, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is a disease, obviously. And then there is another disease called variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease.
Okay.
Variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is completely different. That's the one that you get from eating infected beef.
Is this mad cow?
This is mad cow, yeah. So like I said, it's a variant. It's called variant, but it's not the same disease. CJ disease usually occurs spontaneously, which is terrifying.
Come again?
It occurs spontaneously.
Why?
They don't know.
Sweet.
They suspect it's because of prions, which I think we talked about briefly, and I don't have a super concrete understanding of prions. Science doesn't. They know what they are, but they don't really understand how they build up and how they affect people. But it's essentially like a little thing in your brain that causes it to self-destruct. They build up over time. Everybody has them. But all of a sudden, in some people, they go wild. And those people get CJ disease.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Horrifying.
Horrifying. Now, it also has been said that you might be able to get it from ingesting the brain or spinal fluid of a person.
I was going to ask, is this like the Papua New Guinea disease?
Which is actually where I'm going next.
Sorry.
No, that's perfect. Perfect segue. Because I was thinking that this was also the Kuru disease, which exists in Papua New Guinea. Now, scientists believe that Kuru was an outbreak of CJ disease because the Foray people, or the Four people, I don't know how it's pronounced, so please correct me if you do know.
Yeah.
They traditionally consumed the flesh of the dead to free the spirits. And they believed that by eating certain body parts, you helped the person to pass on to the afterlife. So the muscles were saved for the men of the tribe, I think, as a show of strength. And then the brains were typically eaten by the women and children. Now, again, scientists believe that what probably happened is a villager died of the spontaneous development of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. And then as they were going through their funeral procession with their traditional values, with their traditional mechanisms of mourning the dead,
Sure. Eating the brains. You mean.
eating the brains, that it turned into an epidemic. And then people continued to die. They continued to get CJ disease and then die of CJ disease. And then the remaining villagers ate their brain.
Sure.
And it goes on and on and on.
Yeah. But that was patient zero. They think it was spontaneous.
They're pretty sure it was spontaneous. Now, again, the problem is this isn't a super well understood disease. It has a 100% fatality rate, as far as I could tell.
Whoa.
It does not seem like a pleasant way to go. So I really hope that your corrections are a little bit lighter than this.
Yeah,
'cause that's my last one.
So what you're telling me is don't die of mad cow disease.
Don't die of mad cow disease.
Gotcha.
Just to be safe, don't eat beef. And also, don't cannibalize people.
Shoot. I'm going to have to change my diet.
I don't want to shit on anybody's culture by any means. But these are just some of the things that I think people should be aware of.
For sure.
Because I want to say that this happened in the 40s or 50s is when scientists started to study it. And at that point, they didn't know what was going on. This has been a retroactive theory on what happened.
Okay.
So all I want to do is just educate people on the dangers
Sure.
of eating the tissues of your fellow humans.
Okay. Good to know. So on episode 4, just a few quick corrections for me. When we were talking about fluorescence, you asked if it was like that scene in The Mummy where they turn the mirrors and it lights up the whole place.
Yes.
So I looked.
Fantastic Hollywood scene.
Yes, which I think they did a segment on that on the Mythbusters and proved that it was kind of ridiculous.
They did.
Because the sun changes position. Weird. In terms of fluorescence, you asked if that's what this was. If it was mirrors absorb the light and then bounce it out and absorb it and keep bouncing it like that. As far as I found, what I said when we recorded initially was, no, it's reflection and it's different than fluorescence, but I wasn't 100% sure. I looked into it. That's pretty much what it is. Reflection, the big differences are reflection doesn't absorb light, and there's no change in energy to the photon, which is the light molecule.
Right.
Whereas fluorescence, it does absorb the light, and because of that, it does change the energy to the photon when it re-emits it.
Okay, that's all very logical.
Right. I think that's not, I don't think necessarily like a hard and fast thing. I think there is a little bit of energy lost with reflection. I'm not too sure, but that's kind of the big difference.
Cool.
Item number 2. We were both wrong. It's pronounced spectroscopy.
Nice.
Yeah. So who knew?
Not us.
Not us. I Googled it. Took 10 seconds to figure it out. Third is sound waves versus gamma rays in terms of how they're detected. I made a comment when we were talking about ambulances and how they were easier to detect sound waves because you can hear them. Which when we were listening to it, it sounded like kind of a stupid thing to say. And it was. It's apples and oranges, basically. Sound waves is a very broad category, and gamma rays are very specific. Gamma rays are on the light spectrum.
Right.
Sound waves are a totally different thing. So there are definitely sound waves that we can't hear. There are sound waves that we can hear. There are light rays that we can see. There are some that we can't. Apples and oranges, it totally depends where on the different spectrum. So that's my correction. Stupid comment. I just wanted to make sure I corrected it.
We all appreciate that.
Yes, that's why we're here. And then finally, you asked if the Mossbauer effect was applicable in things like matter and antimatter.
That's a good question. Good job, Past Kelsey.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I didn't know, because this subject is a very lengthy rabbit hole that goes pretty deep into quantum mechanics.
I bet there are multiple theses about this.
There are, and I found some pretty cool things when I was looking into it. I definitely didn't find all of the information, obviously, but I did find out that the Mossbauer effect is extremely applicable to matter and antimatter. So the production of photons or gamma rays is basically an interaction between matter and antimatter. The observation of those photons or gamma rays is through the Mossbauer spectroscopy.
Interesting.
Right?
Your topics are so much cooler than mine.
Yeah, but I know so much less about them. Yeah, and that's not even the cool part. Ready?
No.
So there's something, and I had no idea this existed, but it's like next level Star Wars kind of stuff. It's called antimatter rocket propulsion. Are you
Hell
aware of
yeah.
this? Yeah, right?
I don't know anything about it, but I'm on board.
I know, totally. It's like something out of Star Trek. It's just out of this world. Antimatter rocket propulsion basically uses the Mossbauer effect to transmit energy gamma rays to propel rockets. It is an insanely complicated subject because it combines quantum mechanics with rocket science, and that's just something that's a little out of my league. So we'll give a link to that. Feel free to follow that rabbit hole, the long distance that it goes. Super cool though, right?
Yeah.
I know.
And if we have any listeners that are in this realm, please hit us up.
Yeah, definitely. You drop something in the comments. I mean, I cannot overstate how
infantile our knowledge is.
That's accurate. But I'm looking for a term that makes me feel better about myself.
Sorry.
Yeah. But we're really, especially me, I'm very much sort of the layman. So if you have insight into this, feel free to comment. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
Maybe if enough of you tweet at Neil deGrasse Tyson, he'll come on the podcast and talk about things.
Yeah, there you go.
Which actually reminds me of a little bit of housekeeping. We have 2 more content-driven episodes and then 1 more corrections episode before we take a mid-season break. So our intention is to do 6 episodes with 3 corrections for 3 pods throughout the year, and then take a little bit of time off. We love making this podcast and we love producing it, but it just takes us a lot of time. Mm-hmm. So having a little break for ourselves gives us that time to sort of catch up on things, to put together questions that you might have, maybe even put together some bonus content, which would be fabulous.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe it'll give me time to do a little bit more research on my content, because I'm not super great at it right now. I'm going to get better.
You're not the one who has to apologize about that.
No, I think that you do better than me.
I don't agree. I definitely feel maybe I pick too lofty of subjects.
No, your subjects are fantastic.
Right? Yeah, they're too lofty. I should be like for my level of intelligence, I should be doing like basic arithmetic.
Don't put yourself down like that. Be nice to my friend Reese.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, as always, I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Reese.
And thank you for listening to Charismatic Megafauna.